No, one of the things that I meant, I think, as you all know, or you probably wouldn't be a bit surprised, we had conflict in Australia 30 years ago.
In the Barber family?
In the Barber family.
Oh my God.
Yes. And when I went to Erich, very upset, Erich said, there's no group that doesn't have conflict of one sort or another at some level. Yeah. And so I talked a bit about the general subject of conflict at the LA Centre last weekend. And one of the things that occurred to me was, at the time of Jesus, the Christians of those times could have been us people. It could have been all of us in a different body. We came together because of persecution, and it would have been easy. It would have been easy and enjoyable, the bonding that occurred because of the outside persecution. And the same when you were Muslims, when you were with Muhammad. It's interesting, isn't it? When you think that there's 8,400,000 lives human lives that we live, I'm sure that we were probably around at that time. Yeah. Anyway, again, it was the same. They came together. If you read how much they were, what they went through in order to survive the attempts that the opposition paid to eliminate them, and now we don't have that. It's just that was the first point. Now the second thing that occurred to me was that how Jesus brought people together and inspired them with the carrot of heaven. How he emphasized the attainment of heaven, and Muhammad went a bit further and promised paradise with all its goodies. and look what Barbara has done. Barbara has promised this infinite knowledge, infinite power, infinite bliss. I mean, the carrot gets bigger. Yeah. But what it's, to me, it's so interesting that, how will I put it? Maybe we can perhaps speculate that all of us here were with Jesus, and at that time the mind, because we'd had 2,000, perhaps 2,000 less lives, our mind was a little bit simpler, and we were happy with problems. A little story that Jesus would tell, and we'd all be moved. And again with Muhammad, the same thing. Now our mind is so much more complex, and we're not satisfied. We're not satisfied enough when Barbara says, "Love me," and love each other. It's too simple. We need hefty discourses, and yet at the same time, it's very difficult for us to work together. And it's interesting, the challenge that Barbara has given us, without any outside help, if you know what I mean, in the form of persecution or threats of extermination. We're given that challenge of actually working together, worshipping together, and it's only possible obviously, depending upon the extent to which we love Baba, and we seek to live up to that. It's interesting. In the time of Jesus, what they did was that so many of them fled to the desert, and you may have heard of the Desert Fathers. There's some wonderful stories with regard to that. Now we need to flee in terms of detachment. And I don't know, I just as a beautiful example to me, he inspires me when I get upset with people who don't agree with me. I know it is strange, but there are some. Yeah. An example to me is Mayawan, Erich's brother, and Baba said once, pointing to him at a distance, and he said to whoever he was with, "There is one who is in the world but not of it." And Mayawan is a beautiful example of living in the midst of a thriving, active ashram. People coming and going all the time, and he's there welcoming them and responding to them, and yet he's detached. It's just a very good example. Anyway, but anyway, in the time of Jesus, they one of the things that the Christians did was to flee to the desert. And there's if you don't mind, I'll read you a story.
Good.
Yeah, which I sort of rewrote, from old English. Where am I? Sorry. St. Paul of Thebes, Thebes. Is that Thebes? Is that right? Thebes? Anyway, during the time of severe persecution, when many Christians died by torture and sword, Paul, a youth of about 15 years and heir to great wealth, fled to the country to escape death. He was well educated, of a gentle nature, and a strong lover of God. Then, realizing he was to be betrayed by his brother-in-law, he fled further and further into the mountains, there to wait until the persecution subsided. Gradually, over time, Paul became more and more attuned to a solitary life and to a loving concentration on God. And finding in the mountains, by chance, a huge cave screened by a stone, he settled there for the remainder of his life. The cave led into a spacious courtyard open to the sky, roofed by the wide-spreading branches of an ancient palm and with a spring of clear water. Here, in this beautiful home provided by God, Paul lived his life in prayer and solitude. How he lived in detail, God knows, although it is recorded. Each day, Paul would gather palm leaves, and even though he lived beyond a place to sell them, would weave such a measure of woven baskets as though he lived by it. Isn't that beautiful? I thought that's so wonderful. When his cave was filled with his work, he would burn it and begin anew his labours. Thus he helped to maintain his focus and perseverance in love for God, in the face of loneliness and lack of worldly stimulation. It is recorded that there he dwelt for 113 years. Now elsewhere in the desert dwelt St. Anthony, an old man of 90 years. As he himself recorded, there suddenly came to his mind the thought that no better monk than he abode in the desert. We do have them. But in the quiet of the night, it was revealed to him that another, better by far, did dwell deep in the desert, and he should make haste to visit him. So at break of day he set off, feeble and supporting himself with a staff, not knowing the direction he should take, yet firm in his belief that God would lead him to his servant as he had asked, as God had asked. Despite the burning heat of the desert, the scorching sun overhead, and thus struggling in great difficulty, he did not flinch from his quest. Hardly had such a resolution come to him, it is recorded, a most strange creature appeared, and being asked where did the servant of God dwell, uttered some barbarous speech, but pointed out the way, and then swiftly disappeared across the open desert. Such a visitation again from God, albeit of a different strangeness, came later to the old man, and he struggled on over the second day. That night he spent entirely in prayer. In the early light of dawn on the third day, he saw a she-wolf steal into a certain mountain, and following her came to a cave. Venturing in slowly in darkness, he stumbled over a stone, and at the sound St. Paul shut the door of his sanctuary and secured it. Then St. Anthony fell upon his knees before the door and prayed for hours for admittance, pleading, "You know who I am and why I have come. I know I'm not worthy to see you, yet I prevail not. Yet if I prevail not, here will I die before your door." Jesting, St. Paul answered that seeing it was a dying man before his door, why should he not open it? And on so doing, they embraced each other and joyfully gave thanks to God for their meeting. After this, Paul sat beside Anthony and spoke to him. "He that you have sought with so much labour, you see now a body in old age, decrepit and worn out, and that will soon be dust. But because love endures all things." Isn't that a beautiful phrase? "Tell me, how fares the human race, if new roofs have risen in the cities? Whose empire now sways the world, if many still live a life of ignorance and waywardness?" As they talked, a crow softly settled on a nearby branch and then deposited a whole loaf of bread before their wondering eyes. "See," said Paul, "God has sent us our meal, God the merciful, God the compassionate. It is now 60 years since I have had each day half a loaf of bread, but now because you have come, Christ has doubled the ration." Each sought the other to break the bread, the one as the guest, the other as the senior, finally grasping it together, and then each accepted whatever be their lot in the breaking of the bread. After this, and drinking a little water, they gave thanks to God and spent the night in vigil. In the morning, Paul spoke to Anthony. "I have known, my brother, of your existence in the desert for long, and have long known that God would send you to me now that the time has come for sleeping, to shelter this body in the ground, earth to earth." Anthony wept on hearing this and begged to go with him. But Paul gently admonished, "Do not seek your own, but seek another's good. It is good that you continue to show our brethren of the desert the example of enduring love for God. Your time has not yet come. Now I ask of you, go and bring the cloak which a certain man of God gave you to wrap around my body." He said this so that Anthony would not be present at his departure, not that he cared whether his body was covered or not. Anthony did not want to depart from one whom he felt to be so close to God, but out of such love for Paul and in obedience to his wishes, he somehow hastened on the return journey, fearful that Paul would depart before he returned. Hardly pausing for rest and food, he again set off across the desert to St. Paul. But as he feared, even on only the second day, he had a vision of Paul ascending to heaven, and he wept. "Why did you send me away? And without farewells, to have barely known you, and now, alas, so soon gone." And he continued to hasten to the cave. His vision was true, for there he saw on arrival the lifeless body of Paul, still kneeling in prayer with hands stretched out to his beloved God. With love, Anthony wrapped the body in the cloak and carried it outside, saying prayers as he did so. But then he realized that he had no spade with which to bury St. Paul in the ground. As he stood troubled and sad, 2 lions came bounding towards him out of the desert. At first Anthony feared at their sight, but then, turning to God, he awaited them calmly. They came straight to the dead body of St. Paul, expressing in their roars their own lament for their master. After they dug with their paws a hole big enough for Paul's body, they turned to Anthony for his blessing, and receiving it with reverence, they then departed. Anthony again with difficulty lifted the body and lovingly laid it in the grave and covered the earth in a mound over it. In happy remembrance of St. Paul, he took the woven palm leaf cloak that Paul had worn. Returning to the monastery, he recounted the whole story to all the brethren, and on special days, such as Easter, he wore Paul's cloak. Isn't that a lovely story? Yeah. Yeah, I liked it. Yeah. Now, what? Ah, yes, that's right. Yeah. One of the stories that I told, one of the stories was the story of Buddha, from Buddha, the life of Buddha. But in the telling of it, I didn't tell it, but I remembered another story, wonderful story that Erich told. And I hope I can remember it fully. And if you remember it, then help me out. It actually comes from the Desert Fathers, but Erich put it in Sufi times. It was interesting. It was natural. But what happened was there was an abbot of the Desert Fathers. He had a following, and they had, cells, and it was like a congregation, and he was the head of it. And another abbot came, another man of God, a seeker of God, came and said to him, I'm seeking to establish myself in the desert. In the desert, do you mind? Can you loan me a cell for the time being while I prepare myself for the journey? And the first abbot said, "Yes, sure, of course." And so the new man of God, the man of God, settled into the cell. And then, after a day or two, the abbot noticed that he was attracting a lot of his brethren, how would I say, his disciples, if you like, and so he spoke to his right hand, his chief disciple, and said, "Please go go and see when he's departing. He didn't like this development, and so the disciple went to the man of God and said, "My master is so pleased that you're here, and he hopes that you're comfortable, and that all is well with you, and you know, please stay. You know, he is very happy that you're here." And the man of God said, "You know, thank you, master," and so the disciple went back and reported, "All's well. He's comfortable, and he will be departing soon." See, and so the abbot was okay. And another day or two passed, and again there were everyone seemed to be flocking to this man of God, and so he sends the disciple again. Now you can repeat it a number of times, and the message got more and more. It goes stronger and more severe. When is he departing? And each time the disciple would say how pleased that his master was that he was there, and that he hoped that all was well. And finally, after some days, this was too much for the abbot, and he said to his disciple, "Okay, we'll go there and demand that he leaves." And the disciple said, "Look, sir, please, you know, oh master, please let me go there, because so that the other disciples, you know, the other brethren would not be disturbed by what is happening. I'll go there first." So he goes and says to the man of God, "My master is coming to greet you, and to wish you well." See, himself. And so the man of God was so overjoyed at the thought, and he left and met him halfway and embraced him with love. And of course the abbot was so overcome that he himself wept, and they both prayed, gave thanks to God, and all was well. Afterwards the abbot said to his disciple, "What did you really say?" Yeah. It was a lovely example. I've forgotten now the point that Erich was making, but isn't it funny? I just suddenly remembered that story. Yeah, I remember Erich telling it. And it's actually it's based upon an incident that occurred in the Desert Fathers.
Well, it's an example of promoting harmony.
Yes, yes. You know, talking about Erich again, not that I mentioned this, but, you know, again, I've said about the example of Mayawan being in the world but not of it. But Erich is, of course, the greater example to me. And the sort of thing that not only did he forgive me at times, you know, if he lost his temper with me, he'd come to me and say, "I'm sorry, brother, you know, that I spoke harshly." I mean, I was the one at fault, but because he reacted, you know, that's incidental. But what the example that I always have in mind was after Barbara, you know, before Barbara dropped the body for a couple of years, Barbara was in seclusion, and the Hindus and other close Barbara lovers were very upset that they were not able to be with Barbara, to see him. And there was an occasion when Pukar, an ex-freedom fighter, very fiery, he came down with a band of others from Hamirpur during that time. It was during 1968. And parked himself outside the gates of Guru Prasad. Barbara was there at that time, and demanded he was not going to move until he saw Barbara. And despite the efforts of the Mandali, look, please, it's nothing to do with us. We can't. This is Barbara's order. you know, he was going to stay there and come what may. And it was only with great difficulty that they were finally moved out from away from the gates to the Puna Barber Centre. And finally, I think there was a message from Barber. Anyway, they departed. But this was, you know, there was a lot of feeling. And then all of a sudden, Barber's dropped the body. And these people had not seen Barber. And so there was a lot of ill will against the Parsees who were surrounding Barber. You know, Erich, Money, you know, Pendu, you know, although they were, apart from Bao and Francis, they were Parsees. And Baal Natu, yeah, but he wasn't there. Baal Natu came. He was a close one, but he, of course, he was not there during those last couple of years. Apart from the meeting that Barber had, you know, with regard to the setting up of the darshan.
Was Alibar there?
Alibar was there. Yeah. Well, he's Muslim. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, the Hindus blamed the Muslims, and there was a lot of ill will and a lot of nasty, you know, talk and accusations that, you know, yes?
You mean the Hindus blamed the Parsees?
The Hindus blamed the Parsees. I'm sorry, I'm not making myself clear. Yeah, the Hindus blamed the Parsees for not seeing Barber. They reckoned that the Parsees had kept Barber to themselves. This was what was stated. And okay, I was with Erich under the veranda, early 70s. I was standing there, and round the people were arriving in, you know, cars and whatever to visit Marizad, and round the corner came one of the real chief ringleaders, one of the Hindus, and of the you know, discussion, and as soon as Erich saw him, we were standing together just near Erich's cabin. Erich immediately left and met him halfway and embraced him as warmly as he embraced me. I can see it in my mind's eye now. It made such an impression on me. I still can't do it, but hey. It's a lovely example. I'm hoping that, you know, it'll sort of work its way into my mind. Yeah. Anyway, you're right. And anyway, one of the stories that I read at LA Centre. Do you mind hearing another story from Buddha? Good. I'm glad. Because I like it. These are stories that I've prepared thinking that, say, what I've got in mind is, here we are, is reprinting. Let me tell you, this became about because John and Wendy Borthwick, barber lovers in Australia, naturally, you know, this is where good work is being done. They have 55 shops, and in each of the shops, of course, there's a photograph of Barber and books.
This is like a retail shop.
It's a retail shop. Sorry, wow. It's not upmarket but middle class Indian and homewares, you know, clothing, but very tastefully done. Each shop is they have a good eye for taste. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so what we decided, a lot of the barber books sorry, I don't want to be critical, but they're not colourful enough. This is getting embarrassing. I didn't. I forgot that we got the.
Where you are. To new people.
Yeah. So what we want is we want for people to spot them. See, so thanks. You don't mind. So that's why we're making them bigger, and Wendy even sort of tells the shopkeepers, don't worry about if they get pinched. It's fine. As long as they get distributed, then they're not a thing to make money on. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the first, and so the next one will be a reprint of It So Happened.
Oh, great.
Yeah, with more stories and things added. Okay? Yeah. So there is a, we do something in Australia.
That's good to know.
Thank you. That's a bit condescending, I think. All right. This is, I've just called it Harmony. A young man of the brethren, this is the time of Buddha, at the time of Buddha, in a certain place, was expelled because of an alleged indiscretion. But half the brethren disagreed. By the way, this is another favourite story of Erich's. That's why I remembered it and I found it. If you want to read it in the original sort of more archaic English, it's in the footprints of the Buddha. And a disruptive dispute arose between the two parties, with each reviling and slandering each other. Common? Sort of familiar? This was reported to the Buddha, and although he counselled each party, they continued to quarrel and began to worship separately. When this was reported to the Buddha, he said, "Loud is the voice which worldlings make. But how can they be blamed when divisions arise also in the Sangha?" Sangha. Sangha? It's must be I don't know, a name for the brethren, for the ashram. Hatred is not appeased in those who think, "He has reviled me, he has wronged me, he has injured me." Hatred is not appeased by hatred. Hatred is appeased by not hatred. This is the eternal law. When the dispute continued, despite his words, Buddha thought to himself, "It is no easy task to instruct these headstrong and infatuate fools." And he rose from his seat and went away. I can even imagine Barbara sort of doing it. Anyway, in the absence of the Buddha, the quarrels became worse, and the lay devotees then became disgusted with these particular brethren and ceased honouring and supporting them. Funds dried up, so that brought them to their senses. With this serious development, the brethren repented and decided to go in one body to the Buddha and seek settlement of their dispute. The Buddha said concord must be re-established both in the spirit and in the letter. And he then told the story of Prince Dighavu, the long-lived. The king and queen of a small kingdom fled before the invasion by the much stronger neighbouring kingdom in order to avoid unnecessary hardship for their people. They settled in a small village as potters, and a son, Dighavu, was born to them. And under their guidance he grew up strong, wise, educated and accomplished. But their existence, and particularly of the son, was betrayed to the victorious king, and he, knowing that the son could surely seek to kill him, sought their capture and execution. The son happened to be away, but the parents were seized and taken for execution. As they were led to the place of execution, the father saw his son amidst the crowd and called out, O son, be not far-sighted, be not near-sighted, for not by hatred is hatred appeased. Hatred is appeased by not hatred only. After the execution, the son drugged the guards with strong wine, and in the night laid his parents on the funeral pyre and burnt them with all honour and religious rites. When the victorious king heard this, and thus knowing the son was alive, became afraid that Digvahuvu would seek to assassinate him. Digvahu then obtained employment in the stables of the palace, and one night the king heard a most beautiful lute and voice singing. He sought the identity of the singer, and seeing the fine young man, brought him into the palace itself. Gradually the young man became more and more trusted by the king, until he was a constant companion to the king. One day they went hunting, and in time, separated from his retinue, the king lay down to rest with his head on the lap of Digvahu. He slept, and the young man saw his opportunity to avenge the death of his parents, and unsheathed his sword. Then he remembered his father's words, and sheathed the sword. At this point the king awakened, and said that he had again a recurring dream of being killed by the son. Digvahu said, yes, he is that son, and now the chance for revenge had come. The king pleaded for his life, but Digvahu replied without bitterness or ill will that he cannot grant the king life, since his life is endangered by the king, and he pleaded in turn for the king to grant him his life. The king agreed that, with Digvahu granting life to him, he granted the same to Digvahu. They took each other's hand and swore an oath to do no harm to each other. Then the king asked of Digvahu the meaning of his father's words on the way to the execution, and he said that his father counselled, do not let your hatred go far, and do not be hasty to fall out with your friends, for hatred is not appeased by hatred, but by not hatred. He meant, if Digvahu took the king's life, the king's followers would take his, and then Digvahu's followers would kill them, and so on. Thus hatred would not be appeased. The king was impressed again with the young man's wisdom and maturity, and he gave back the kingdom he had taken and his daughter in marriage to Digvahu. After hearing this counselling from the Buddha, the brethren then discussed their differences in mutual goodwill, and the concord of the Sangha was re-established. Yeah, it's a story that Erich, and I remembered it. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, in talking about conflict, it is inevitable that, because in a way, in a sense, because Baba has so touched us, that each of us feel that right to express our view of whatever the matter is. It's an interesting point of view. I mean, it's an interesting thought, how he in a sense, he's increased our the strength of our convictions, which make it all the more difficult for us to bend the knee and to give in and to accept the fact that one amongst us might be the best person to lead, and accept that.
What do you mean lead?
What?
What do you mean lead?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant in the sense of mutual tasks of pulling together. I mean, we'll say for argument's sake, even coming together in a meeting, who was the best person to inspire that meeting, to help to create the atmosphere of Barbara's love in that meeting? Do you follow what I mean?
Or who was the best to order the chairs?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's you know, in every aspect of life, there's always this comes up, and inevitably, Barbara lovers, a number of them, strong people in themselves. I'm not saying everyone is this way, but so many of us are, in the sense that we say, but wait a minute, I think the chairs should be put this way. Yeah, it's a fact. Yeah. I mean, hey, it happens in Australia. and you know, and the only thing is that there's the acceptance in terms of Barbara's cause, out of love for him and his cause of awakening, is to accept that one person is best. One of my favourite sayings is, the tools to him who can best use them. Be open and honest with each other, and sort of accept the fact, yes, so and so is good, and so let us, you know, accept that.
It just reminds me what Kitty used to say is, it's really a bad thing to be isolated, and that the only way to grow is to interact with people.
Absolutely. And that's what Barbara wanted us, he wanted us to have gatherings. Yeah, and there's no question. The direction that he gave, and it's written down, when he told me to develop Avatar's Abode as a place of world pilgrimage, he said, you know, written down that this is a great burden that he's placed on me, and that he wanted everyone to work with me as one heart with many hands. And it's interesting, as soon as that was read, it created differently. What? Cooperate with me? Yeah. And yet, and that conflict, the interesting thing, this is, now I'm being personal, but it just, as a matter of interest, it was the greatest blessing to me. The conflict that I faced there, the fact that we didn't all come together as one heart with many hands, and the fact that I had that differently. After many years, it took time, but then I sort of realised, hey, what a blessing it was! What a greater strength that I've gained in the process of somehow learning to live with that and accepting the fact that, okay, we all have our points of view, and Barbara is also in each one of them, and therefore have respect for each, and at the same time, as Barbara has said, I think it's Barbara. Anyway, it helps to sort of remind oneself of the fact of their love for Barbara and the good characteristics they do have, even if they don't agree with one. Anyway. Sorry, is there anyone like to make a comment?
It happens all the time. Just an hour ago I was Uli was at my house, he's 6 years old, and he said, and I said, I'm going to keep silent tomorrow. He said, "You got to remember to keep silence. I think you need some help." I said, "What kind of help?" He said, "Signs. Let's make signs." So I have a bunch of scrap paper. And since he's learning to write and stuff, I said, "You make the sign." He said, "No, you make the sign." So we're getting into it. We know this old lady needs help. So, okay, I'll make the signs. He said, "Yes, I'll get the Scotch tape and I'll put them around the house." And he said, "When people come in your house, where do they go first?" I said, "They usually head toward the kitchen." So he made an arrow, and it says, "Silent stay, no talking, shush, quiet." But we had to get that harmony to get the job done.
But it is true what Sheila said, you know, that Barbara wanted us, that there was that time in Christianity where, yes, you know, the Desert Fathers went and worshipped God by themselves alone, and they endured out of love for Him, absolute loneliness. I mean, it's fascinating reading the lives that have come down of those men. But with us, because of the greater development of our minds, we're so much more active. As I've said, you know, earlier, at the time of Jesus, a simple parable was enough. Not now. And so it's so good not retreating from the conflict and saying, "Oh, forget it. Yeah, well, I'll just go off by myself." If one can endure it and sort of work through it, what I've noticed, that even a most minute little degree of opening that I might have in me towards somebody, Barbara helps. All of a sudden, there's a sort of, how would you put it, some freeing, a degree of detachment develops. So that that's why I was thinking that for us, the retreat into the desert is a retreat into ourselves, a form of detachment, so that we can be with each, and yet at the same time maintain our focus on Barbara. And that's obviously in the case of Mayawan. I think of Mayawan as a very good example. He's always so responsive and loving, like his brother, and Manu and the whole family were like that, as you know. And he was talking about, I suppose the series, the series of books, Divine Humanity, and in the first one, I think it's in the first one, I tell the birth of Mayawan. Do you remember that story? If you haven't, it's so lovely. Guy Mai and the family went to see Barbara in the 20s, late 20s, and after seeing Barbara at Mehrabad, Barbara said to Guy Mai and her sister Gula Masi, who was with Guy Mai, "Pay your respects to Barbara Jan." On the way through, they go to Pune, and then from Pune they go to Nagpur, where they lived. And so they went to, so the two of them, but not the girls. Barbara said not the two daughters were not to go. So the two women went to Barbara Jan, And Baba Jan at the time was surrounded, was hemmed in with a crowd of women, Indian women, who were all trying to get closer to Baba Jan, because Baba Jan had a coconut in her hand, was sort of balancing this, apparently this coconut. And to receive a coconut from a perfect master is the greatest blessing one can, well, one of the great blessings one can receive. It means something good would come from it. So all the Indian women were trying to get her attention and get the coconut. And so when Gai Mai and Gula Masi approached, Gai Mai said, look, let's pay our respects from this distance. You know, the thought of venturing into this crowd of women was not to her liking. She was quite shy, whereas Gula Masi was quite forward. And Gula Masi said nothing of the sort. She just ploughed through with great protest from the Indian women, and went to Baba Jan to pay her respects right there. And all of a sudden, Gai Mai finds that she's got the coconut. And of course there was a cry of protest from the Indian women, and Gai Mai wanted to, sort of said, look, let me give it to one of them. And Gula Masi said, no, well, you certainly will not. Quite vehemently, this was too precious a thing to be given. And so they retreated. And okay, time and Gai Mai found herself pregnant again. And this was after 10 years. The three, Erich, I think Meru was next, and Manu, and that was 1920, and this was now 1930, and the old Parsi woman doctor, when she examined Gai Mai, realised that the baby was not in the right position, and so she put her under anaesthetic, so that she could manipulate the baby, whatever happens, whatever was done, so that it would be right. And under that anaesthetic, Gai Mai had a vivid dream. She said it was vivid, and in that dream she saw Baba and Baba Jan coming towards her, carrying like a great egg. And in the egg was a boy child. Yes. And she said she felt an intense joy. The dream was vivid, and the joy that she felt with the two was intense. And they came and gave her the egg. The egg and they disappeared at that point. They disappeared and the egg was there, and okay, she came to, and apparently one of the nurses or somebody there, as a bit of a joke, said, "Oh, you had a girl, boy," and Gai Mai said, "Oh no, it was a boy." Yeah, and that was my one. Yeah, so what a birth! Isn't that beautiful? All right. Do you want more or what? Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you this story. This is a story of pilgrimage. Is that all right? Yeah. We had enough on the conflict? Yeah. Yeah. Let's forget it. Yeah. A certain man, a certain master, a Sufi master, he went to Mecca and did the pilgrimage, all the rites. And afterwards, when it was finished, he lay down and went to sleep. And in the sleep, he had a dream. And there were two angels, and they They were together, talking together. And one said, "How many came on pilgrimage this year?" And the other said, 600,000. Interesting figure, isn't it? This was sort of like 1,000 years ago. And the other said, "Oh, and how many of those pilgrimages were accepted by the Lord?" And the other angel said, "Not one." And at this point, the Sufi master couldn't contain himself. He jumped involved in the dream and said, "What? All those people that came with such difficulty, crossing deserts and mountains and of hardship, not one was accepted by the Lord?" And one angel said, "Well, one was. He didn't do the pilgrimage, but his pilgrimage was accepted." And the master said, "Who was that?" And the angel said, "A cobbler named such and such from Damascus." And so the master awoke and resolved to go to Damascus and find this cobbler, get his story. So he went, and he eventually tracked him down, came to the house where he lived, called out, and the man came forward, and the master said, "Are you so-and-so?" "Yes, I am." And then the master recounted this dream he had, and the man wept. And seeing that this was obviously a man of God, he told the story. He said, "For 30 years I saved in order to go on pilgrimage, 1 year. And I finally had accumulated 350 dirhams," whatever that was. And he knew that was sufficient for him to go on pilgrimage. So that year he was resolved to go. But before he went, his wife, who was pregnant, said, there's a smell coming from a nearby house of some delicious cooking." You know how women who are pregnant sort of get fancies? Yeah. "Please go and ask for some of that food." So the man, the cobbler, went next door and called, and a woman came to the door, and the cobbler said, "My wife was seeking a little of your food." And the woman burst into tears and said, "Please," she said, "my children had not eaten for 3 days, and I found a dead donkey on the roadside, and I hacked off a piece and cooked it. It's not lawful food." And the cobbler said, "My heart burned within me, and I gave her the 350 dirhams and said, 'This is my pilgrimage.'" Yeah. And the master, the Sufi master, said, "The Lord judged correctly." Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice story. I'll have to read it because I don't remember the verses. An Arab had a very beautiful concubine, and he was captivated by her. But the man was a gambler. This is one of a series that I've selected on love and marriage and, whatnot. There's a whole series of different sort of stories. And he lost everything except the woman. He went to his friends begging for money to support his companion. When she found out what he was doing, she said, "Do not do that. Sell me instead. If Allah wills, He will unite us again." The Arab brought her to Umar, the governor of Persia, and Umar beheld her. He was deeply attracted and asked of her price. The Arab replied, 100,000 dirhams, but she is worth much more to the one who knows her value. So Umar bought the concubine. As the Arab was leaving with the money, the woman spoke to him in poetic form. Let the money you took be of good use to you. Only my memories of you are left to me. When my tears surge and I tell myself, who cares if you cry? Where should I turn but to the pain in my heart? With whom should I converse, and of whom should I think? The man, hearing this, and gazing a last farewell on her, wept and replied, if it were not for the tyranny of fate, nothing but death would have separated us. I will put my head against the head of the pain of your absence, and I will speak only with it, and think of you alone. Farewell, we shall not see each other, for it is left to the will of Umar. Umar then spoke, if it is left to me, let it be. Take your companion and the money too. So the man left with his companion and the money in great joy. Umar reflected, Allah knows that I could not have bought a greater reward for my 100,000 dirhams than to lawfully unite two lovers and save them from the terrible pain of separation.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, as I thought it was a nice story, and I love the verses. I couldn't resist it. Yeah.
Are these stories that Erich told?
No, sorry.
No.
No. No. What? See, I enjoy reading books, you know, and particularly Sufi books. I don't know. Erich and I sort of agreed one day, nothing less than a perfect master. But I can't sort of honestly say that all these books are really at a perfect master level. But there's some wonderful stories. There's another nice story is a young man was approaching a certain place on his horse, a horse that he loved dearly, and he demounted at one point on his journey to, and the horse started to nibble at a branch of a tree of the orchard that was over the fence that was stretching out, and the young man pulled the horse back to stop it, but the owner of the orchard had seen this and had picked up a stone and thrown it and threw it in such a way that the horse died. And the young man was so upset because he loved that horse. It was his companion. And he picked up that stone and threw it back, and it killed the old man, the owner. So the two sons of the owner took the young man to Omar. Omar was the second caliph after Muhammad. There was Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar was the first. Omar was the second. And Omar said, yes, you should, you will be executed because you killed. And the young man accepted this and said, it's true that I threw in anger and distress. But please, can I have 3 days to return to my home, because I hold a certain sum of money in security for an orphan, and I wish to return so that I can give that money to somebody else for safekeeping, and I will return. And Omar said, but you need somebody to stand surety for you. In other words, if you do not return, that person will die in your place. This is the law. And so the young man looked and saw among the old companions of Muhammad, the prophet, these old companions were called the companions of the veranda. They were ones dependent upon Muhammad. Those close ones, like Erich. I mean, like the Mundley, were dependent. It's interesting. I mean, Mundley is a word that means of the household. So it's like these were the companions of the veranda. So the young man pointed to one, and he said, surely, I accept that. So the young man set off. And the days passed, and the third day came, and no sign of him. And then almost at the end of the day, he appeared, tired and dishevelled, exhausted, but had come. And the people, the gathering said to the companion, "What if he hadn't appeared? And why did you stand surety?" And the companion said, "Surely there is kindness and generosity in Islam." And so touched was the two sons of the old man who had brought the charge that they said, "We forgive him." Yeah. And so the young man was freed. Yeah. Yeah. But it was in other words, that was the level of love that one has, for the Lord, for Muhammad, that made one stood surety for one who was on that mission for an orphan. Sorry, if you follow me. Yeah. Yeah, there's so many of those sort of stories. Or like the Ali. Now Ali was the fourth caliph. He was the right hand of God. From my point of view, I don't know, but I regard Ali as the right hand of Muhammad. He was the lion of Islam. And he didn't want to become caliph. He only, under protest, is like Erich, when Baba said to Erich, "You be also on the board," and Erich said, "Please, not me." And Baba said, "All right, but attend every meeting." So he got him anyway. Anyway, so Ali, they're in battle, and a young man comes towards Ali, brandishing his sword, ready for battle, and Ali said, "Young man, do you know what you're doing? You'll die. I can easily kill you." And the young man said, "I love a woman, and the woman has said that she will love me in turn if I kill you." And Ali said, "But what if you are killed?" And the young man said, "How wonderful it is! What does it matter if one dies for the sake of love? And in any case, the pangs of love will disappear with it." And Ali was so impressed at this that he laid down his sword and said, "Dispatch me if you wish." And the young man was so impressed with Ali's love for in the name of love, that he turned to Islam and declared himself a follower. Anyway, all right, there's some of the stories. All right, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
I enjoy telling them. I hope I told them well.
It's always wonderful when you come here. It's so homey and
it is nice. I like it. Yeah.
Bill, there was one story that I heard from Andrea, I don't know if Andrea's still here.
Yeah.
But it had to do with Erich, and it had to do with harmony.
Yes.
And it had to do with a some decision that the trust made, a board decision, that Erich was vehemently against, didn't want to go along with it at all. But when the board made the decision against what Erich wanted, he got 100% behind it as if he was behind it and making the decision
Exactly.
himself.
Exactly. I can well believe that. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Wonderful. And that's that is what we should do. And it takes courage. It takes resolve to be his. You know, to uphold love for the Lord rather than one's own self. But I mean, it's a struggle, but how wonderful it is. All I know is that even the minute move towards that, Barbara responds. I do know that. There's no question that Barbara helps and makes one say, yeah, all right, okay, I can maybe do a bit better next time. Yeah.